Hey everyone, Suri here, and welcome back to another week of Aether defense matches. I didn't do much, well, anything really, to tweak the dark defense for this week. I figured it was probably going to be solid enough to last one more week before I make any major changes. And stalling this long before I update it means that I'll get to see what the new defense or offense mythic that we get in a week from now is going to be. And hopefully be able to update my defense around that. Things got a little bumpier than I'd have liked this week. There were actually 2 clean losses and 1 messier loss. But in the end I only ended up losing 25 lift from it, so it's not as bad as it could have been. I think I'm more annoyed that I didn't get to rematch all 3 of them this week than anything else, but it's alright. So let's get started with this first one. This was a bit of an odd match. I think it was sort of an Ophelia and Owain themed team, which is fun. Owain's he's in an interesting spot. He's always been kind of an odd red sword. Even when he was released, he was never... I don't think you could ever really say that he was at the top of the table competitively. But he's not bad, especially if you just aim his kit at being a melee specialist and ignore ranged entirely. And backing him up with Ophelia does mean that she can really help soften things up for him and pick off any dangerous targets before they become a problem. Unfortunately for them, we did pick up their bolt tower with the catapult, which really limits Ophelia's options. And part of the problem, too, is that they don't even get to charge Ophelia's special at the start of turn 1, which makes it really hard for her to actually pick knockouts up. They spent a few turns just moving around the map, and they end up taking a 50-50 on this heavy trap.
I am death itself.
And even though they can actually punch through it, Hell doesn't get knocked out by Freya, and without a special and with Felix still guarding Hell, Ophelia can't finish Hell off. So they're kind of stuck here. And well, Eliud doesn't have any problems finishing Freya off. And Milla's stuck right there next to Bramamund, who's also able to pick up a pretty easy knockout. And then gets danced forward and picks up Owain.
Couldn't save anyone.
And then gets danced one more time to pick up Ophelia.
I take my stand here.
So many stars.
They pull back here instead of just surrendering, but there's not much Air can do on her own at this point.
Death comes to me.
Eliud picks up the last knockout and brings the match to an end. It's always kind of an odd feeling to see a clean loss after a success. The bright side is I didn't lose lift from it. On the other hand, this was not what I expected to see out of a clean loss. They brought a Brave Hector along, who is Brave Hector. And they're backing him up with a duo peony and a normal peony who's in her bonus week. This mirror impact air with an instant iceberg is actually really neat to see. And I think what they really aim for with this is just to snipe something with air first, which applies defense debuffs, ideally, to the defense team, which makes it very easy for Hector to just one-shot things. And to be fair, he's very good at that, even without defense debuffs, thanks to getting an extra plus 13 in combat attack from these two peonies. And as we'll see here, that's actually a large part of what lets them just clear their way through this. And Hel can handle the first one, but not the second. And the reason she went for him first is because Hector can actually just one-shot Eliwood thanks to all of those attack buffs. Environment can get a chunk in, but thanks to having quick riposte as well as his Maltet, Hector can actually break through the impact effect and double him anyway. And sadly, Felix can't get a whole lot done here either. It was a really clean Brave Hector sweep, and honestly, between this and some of my other recent matches, it's really gotten me thinking about a good hard counter to Brave Hector specifically that doesn't, you know, lose their value in non-Hector matchups. I'm still thinking about it, and depending on what the new mythic is, it'll probably affect how I adapt the defense from there.
Right behind you.
Peony can finish things off.
What? Still asleep?
It could also be as simple as just giving a lunge to Hel, which would have dragged Hector forward and out of range of the duo peonies' root and drive. Or one of them, at least. But yeah, we'll see. It is good to bounce back from a failure with a success, and this was quite a success, actually. This team is very much just an all-in on Ophelia, hit-and-run type of strategy. And, well, when you have a plus 10 life and death for Ophelia, you can definitely understand why you would go for that. They also have a plus 10 Milla. I'm not sure about the sabotage attack, especially now that we have access to sabotage res in the Grail pool. I think she'd be a lot better off using that. And they also have a plus 10 Peony. Spooky Sensor is odd. It doesn't really help support the team, and she can't soak shrines or chills from Ophelia, so... Then they have another plus 10 Peony. While I understand that there were some whales who went for a third plus 10 mythic that was a duplicate before we had 3 available, I never really thought of that as an ideal long-term investment. Because, you know, eventually you do have alternatives, and while stacking the same mythic can be useful, and Peony's one of those that you could really make a case for. I think having variety tends to be better for you overall. And between the Bolt Tower and Ophelia's special, they can make a dent in here. Felix barely missed surviving that, though, which was fun to see. They do a lot of retreating after that, but they don't quite retreat far enough. And Bramman can just step forward and take care of one of the peonies. I think they were hoping to have this peony intercept Eliwood,
I take my stand here.
but unfortunately, since they isolated Azura, Eliwood didn't get danced. Bramman gets to move forward instead. I think they could have finished the match from here, but losing a unit was enough for them to concede. This was another interesting one. It's a bit of a different take on the usual Brave Claw build. And they're using Mirror Stance on him instead of a close counter, which is a really good way to help shut down Galeforces, and also just helps him prevent any specials from activating that might threaten him, usually. It's especially useful if you're not running something like Pulse Smoke in the C slot, because otherwise specials can catch Claude off guard and actually do enough damage to knock him out. You've also got a Lucina to support him. I do kind of regret not picking up a well-built form of Lucina. And a Tamari here. My reasoning behind that was just that I'd already built a Lucina. Not, you know, with all of the top-end stuff, but I did have one, so it would have been nice to get a joint drive and some other fun toys for her, though. They take a couple of turns to set up here. We sniped their bolt tower, so it's a lot harder for them to actually pick anything off before the fight starts. And they set Claude up with Eliwood's lunge in mind, so Eliwood attacks and pulls him back, but he's still in range of Lucina here. And while he can't counterattack either of them, he survives them pretty well, and Hell can't do any damage at all. And he does actually survive Bramman.
Another successful scheme.
And then the heal lets him survive the second attack. Unfortunately, they don't have isolation on the team, so Bramman gets danced forward and, well, Lucina's a much easier target to pick off.
Father, I'm sorry.
And now that Felix actually has a warp pad to move forward, Claude doesn't last very long either.
To you now.
And with their front line down, they just surrender and move on. This was another interesting one. They brought a null follow-up, Mirror Impact Micaiah. This is a really neat build, and seems really well suited for a hit-and-run strategy with the two peonies. Micaiah herself, especially with this kind of a build, has a lot of firepower behind her. So she can usually just fight against the weapon triangle, and her defenses are good enough that she can enemy phase a lot of ranged threats, especially mages, without many problems at all. Even with all of that, though, Felix... I think if there was a way to give him another 10 res, he'd be so much better off. I might end up trying that, just to play around with
Death
things.
is absolute.
Hell nearly secures this knockout, too.
Cowardly tactics.
And they do pull back, but without isolation, Eliwood gets a very easy dance forward into Freya.
Oh, Freya.
And And while Frey is fast, she's not solo here, so she's nowhere near fast enough to get some damage reduction and survive. Then Brammerman gets danced forward and finishes Micaiah off.
Dane will forgive me.
And with only the peonies and Dare left, that's enough for them to concede the match. It isn't often that I see rematches, which is kind of surprising. I only have Hell as the lead. It's probably the mythic merges that scare people off. This one, I think I feel a little bit targeted by this Guinevere. They may not have appreciated how I cleared their map. They also brought a brave Hector along, who's supported with Layla, and their bonus week peony and an heir. Brave Hector and Layla make a pretty good combo, since Layla can pick off or weaken a primary target and then swap Hector in. Or at least that's how it usually works. Force save means that a lot of that doesn't work well, so they have to swap Hector in and pull Layla back with a dance. And unfortunately for them, without Special Fighter, Felix is going to have a much better fight here.
You've shown your weakness.
And then he gets danced forward and picks up a second one on peony.
Time to sleep.
And there's a fun little set of movement here that actually leaves the defense in a perfect formation, and they just surrender at that point. This was another neat one, actually. It's fun to see the more freely available options at higher investment. And this team brought a +10 Seliph, along with a +10 Noe. It's a bit weird not to see her new weapon. I do think it's actually just better than the normal lightning breath, so maybe they just don't have enough dew to refine it yet. Vantage is an interesting skill to give her in the beast slot. They've got the usual Milla, air, and peony support. And they did have an unsniped bolt tower that's in the perfect position to wreck our team. I think they have a bit of a hard time finding a way in, though. So instead they just isolate a Zero. And plonk Seliph on the front line. Unfortunately, that does mean that the healing tower gets a chance to activate, which puts our team back up to full health. And Seliph, even though he has no follow-up, can't handle Felix.
Do I look merry?
They take an attack here with Noe, and then actually surrender almost immediately after. I'm not sure if it was because of the panic smoke, or if it's just that Felix is covering LA Woods so they wouldn't be able to finish him off with air. But at that point they decide it's done. This was another interesting one. Even though we lost, and it wasn't even a clean loss. They have an all-in Galeforce squad here. Raphael has Flashing Blade. Freya has Heavy Blade. Ephraim's got Heavy Blade. Peony's here to dance, and Valoria's here got an almost instantly charged Galeforce. The 2 infantry pulses on this team do a lot of work helping this out. And honestly, this is a really well thought out squad. 4 Wings of Mercies mean that anybody on the front line can turn into a beacon for the rest of the team. So as long as they play it right, they can get a lot of extra actions on this team. They take several turns just setting up. Testing this heavy trap was a large part of it. And then they take another couple of turns to get in formation before they start the fight. They did have a really clever approach to this once they finally got onto it. They started by having Freya attack into Hell, and even though Hell can't actually die to Freya here,
I am death itself.
Freya still gets to activate Galeforce, and they use it to move her onto this bolt trap, which is a bit of a 50-50, but I think it's a reasonable 50-50 to take. And with the bolt trap damage, that activates the Wings of Mercy chain, and it also puts the entire defense team into a very vulnerable health level. Unfortunately, they pick the wrong target here with Ephraim, because he can't activate Galeforce against Felix. Not only does he miss the heavy blade check, but Felix has a guard effect. And without that action, they actually end up in a lot of trouble. They can finish off everything except Bramamond. Just because the only unit with a Galeforce left was Ephraim, who Bramamond decides is the best target and finishes off.
I'm sorry, Leon.
They decide to finish the match here. I think the weirdest part to me was that they didn't even bother picking up the second Aether pot first. But, oh well. Yeah, it was a really interesting strategy overall, and makes me very much want to add a close save unit to this squad just to help shut it down. Seeing a clean loss come in after that messier loss was a little surprising and a little unfortunate as well. Even if I didn't lose lift from it, it's odd to see this defense get hit this hard in 1 week. They did get lucky with this bolt tower not being sniped and being in the right position. And they brought along a +10 Reinhardt to take advantage of it. They're also backing him up with an in-season Leif and 2 dancers, which helps a lot for picking off enough targets that you can isolate one that's not really a threat, which is exactly the strategy they go for here. They take a couple of turns just to clear the structures out while waiting for their bolt tower to go off. And a large part of why this works as well as it does is that this layout doesn't really threaten very much of the map, so they can set up with their dancers very close to the front line and able to go in and dance without any extra movement. Again, if I could give Felix another 10 res, I don't think bolt towers would even be able to do a whole lot to him. It's tricky though. Maybe when we get another mythic. They do take a 50-50 on this heavy trap. And I'm seriously considering just shuffling the traps around, because I think a lot of people see this and are able to reasonably guess that the two traps in front are the actual traps. And between that and the dancers, it's easy enough for Leif and Reinhardt to finish cleaning up the team. Which only leaves Eldigan on the field, and on his own, Eldigan isn't really going to threaten a lot. It was a pretty clean loss. Well executed. And it's food for thought. It is nice to end the week with a win, even though there's still 29 minutes left, and we only got 10 matches this week instead of the usual 11. I don't think we're going to get another one. It's pretty rare to get one this late. This was a good way to end the week, too. They brought a +10 Sophia, along with a +10 Milla, and a +10 Freya. She's really good, honestly. I don't know if I'm ever going to really focus on merging Freya myself, but it's good to see her at +10 because she looks really, really strong. They've also got a Lyn, probably freshly +1 off of the Hero Rises banner, and their bonus week Peony. So I think their initial thought here was to use their Bolt Tower, which we didn't get to snipe, to let Linja pick off Felix, and maybe one or two more, and then let Sophia intercept the rest. Unfortunately for Lyn, she can't deal with Felix, not even after a Bolt Tower hit. So I think what they did was rethink their approach and just try to have Sophia bait. Unfortunately for them, Sophia really can't handle Felix.
This is your name on it.
Into the darkness.
And then between the dance and Elliewood, he gets a warp pad to jump forward and snipe off Lyn. They keep going here, and I think it's because they didn't have any ladders, so they really needed to try and get this. So this ends up being a bit of a bittersweet victory because it's a shame to see them miss out on all of that lift. Yep, and since Azura didn't get isolated, Bramond just gets danced forward
I
and
take my stand here.
takes out Freya.
Oh, Freyr.
Yeah, and without that, there's not really any hope of them coming out of this with a win, so they surrender the match. It was a bit of a bumpy week of defenses. I'm not going to edit things too much during the week, but I am expecting to change up the defense next week once we see what the mythic is. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Good luck with your own matches, and I'll see you next time.